Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Monster Hunter World. I played it on the PS4, it's also available on the Xbox One, and the Switch, I believe. So let's start with the fact that this is one of the first ones on the console in a very long while. It's also very easy to do multiplayer, or at least it's supposed to be. It really didn't work that well, and it's not super intuitive. But let's get into the story, which is, I don't really know much. All I know is you are part of the 5th Fleet, and you were heading to an island when a gigantic dragon fucked up your ship, and you crashed on the island. They're trying to figure out why these dragons migrate to the island, but there's of course all sorts of other very large monsters there, but these dragons are like the size of small islands. And I gotta say, the story is not super engaging because I don't think they do a great job of telling it. I also don't think it's key to the game itself. The previous Monster Hunter games I've played, it never felt like a key ingredient. As for the audio, what little voiceover work there is, it's fine. It's far from great though, but there's not a ton of it. There's a lot of text in this game. I feel like that's one of the things that kind of harms the storytelling, is that there's very little actual telling of it, since most of it is read rather than spoken. There's also not a lot of cutscenes, so there's not a ton of storytelling through that either. Apart from that, I did enjoy the music, and I did enjoy the basically audio for the sound effects and whatnot. I think that all worked well, and I think it adds to the game, and it does a good job. The weapons sound beefy, the guarding sounds beefy. I will say, I feel like there could be a greater variety in sound effects, but what is there works well. As for the gameplay, at the core of it is the missions, which there's a wide variety of, but most of them basically involve hunting a monster of some sort. They could be smaller monsters, kill a certain number, or hunt a very large monster. But you start in your hub area, and you can form parties there and whatnot, and then go out on these missions. And when you go out on these missions, you go to different zones, and those zones are of a decent size, in fact. They're a little maze-like. Some of them can be a little annoying because of that. And I will say, some of the missions could be better explained. I'm going to start with some of the important mechanics that I do have complaints with, and the first is the camera. Specifically, the lock-on feature of the camera. The rest of the time, the camera seems fine, but the lock-on feature is useless, in my opinion. Okay, not completely useless, but it's not as useful as it should be. I feel like a useful lock-on feature would basically guide and aim your character at the target, which it does not. It simply points the camera at the target and not your character. Which that gets to be a huge pain in the ass because you're trying to attack this character, but unless you press forward on the stick so that your character is, facing the target, then you're not going to be facing the target and you're going to be swinging at fuck all. And that is obnoxious. I mean, you kind of get the hang of it eventually, but it never stops sucking, quite frankly. I love the creative character. It's pretty in-depth, but it's also not to the point where it's insane. Now, my next two gripes, they are the biggest and most important in my opinion, and they're honestly like video game sins. The first being, there is no pause feature in this game. You can open a menu, it's not a pause. Like, the game does not stop. And that can be a huge pain in the ass because we all know life can get in the way of gaming at times, and if that happens, well, your mission is on a timer. So basically you have to shut off your console and screw up what's going on, or you basically have to leave the game and let the timer burn down. It sucks, and it's really obnoxious. I don't get why it doesn't exist. Well, I sort of get it, but the problem is I ended up doing a lot of solo stuff, and if I'm soloing, I should be able to pause. I understand if I'm like online and working with other people, pausing is difficult, but if I'm playing solo, I should be able to pause, and I couldn't, and that's obnoxious. The next sin is this game does a completely shit job of letting you know when you're taking damage. There were times where I did not think I was really getting hit by the monster, but I was, and I ended up getting knocked out a few times because of it, and it got really, really obnoxious. Games that do that piss me off because then you die and you have to restart stuff because you didn't know you were getting beaten on. Okay, so I complained about a bunch of stuff and I got my complaints out of the way. I do, however, feel that none of this is really truly ruinous to the gameplay mechanics and whatnot. I did, in fact, enjoy going out on the missions and hunting the monsters, etc. Let's get into the controls. And I remember this from previous Monster Hunter games. Your character moves in a very clunky manner, and that continues in this game. So that's something you have to adapt to and get used to as a gamer. But I will also say this, the controls are far from intuitive at first. That being said, once you have figured it out, it actually works very well. It's just figuring it out to begin with, because like I said, not super intuitive. Lastly, the graphics. I'm kind of torn on this game because it's not the worst looking game I've seen, but it's also not on par with what I expect from a game in 2018. Because last year we had some truly stunning games, and this doesn't quite live up to those. I would put it on par with a game from like 2016 or so. And yes, I do feel like that matters to an extent because we've always seen it with every console. The further along in the console generation, the better and better the visuals became. That being said, it's not a terrible looking game, and I do enjoy the art design of the game, but overall, I love the visuals, I love the design of the monsters, it's really cool and unique, and I do like the way the weapons and gear looks. My biggest graphical complaint, and it really never affected me on mission, which I found very weird, but when I was running around the hub world, I would run into frame rate drops for some reason. Never like horrific, but it was very obvious I was no longer running at 30 frames per second. It would drop down to like 22, and it would just be brief, but it was kind of obnoxious. Nothing horrible, especially since, like I said, it never happened to me when I was on a mission. To wrap this up, if you're a Monster Hunter fan, you probably already bought this game because you're a fan of the franchise in general, but I do think this is a good addition to that franchise. If you were waiting because you were curious and you're pretty keen on Monster Hunter, I would definitely recommend it. If you've never dipped your toes into the Monster Hunter like genre, because there are a few other games out there that do a similar thing, I think this is a good place to go for it. So all of that is all around a recommend. Okay, so in the comments below, why don't you tell me if you like the Monster Hunter games? And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share, subscribe. Have a good one.